Hello and welcome to World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing on CCTV News. I'm your host, Tian Wei. On today's program, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang is in Canada, returning his Canadian counterpart Justin Trudeau's recent visit to China. Bilateral relations have been strong for decades, so why has Li visited so quickly, and which topics will top the agenda? And 30 years ago, Cui Jian performed his song Nothing to My Name, and a Chinese legend was born. We asked the Godfather of Chinese rock and roll his opinion on how China's rock and roll industry has developed so far. Chinese Premier Li Keqiang is now in the Canadian capital, Ottawa, for an official visit. Li's trip marks the first visit to Canada by a Chinese premier in 13 years. The two leaders held talks on Thursday and witnessed the signing of a series of bilateral cooperation documents. The two countries have also launched an annual dialogue mechanism between the Chinese premier and the Canadian Prime Minister to help strengthen exchanges and deepen bilateral cooperation.
It was a meeting of familiar faces. Chinese Premier Li Keqiang saw Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in China just last month. And as they did then, the two got down to business. Specifically the issue of trade. China is Canada's second biggest trading partner, worth around $50 billion. Trudeau said he and Premier Li agreed on Thursday to try to double that number by 2025.
We are pleased to have witnessed the commercial signings today that will help achieve this goal. We know that there's a huge amount of untapped potential in our commercial relationship. This new trade target will benefit Canadian workers and business owners while creating good, well-paying jobs.
China also wants to open talks on a bilateral free trade agreement, but many Canadians remain suspicious of free trade in general and of China. Trudeau's openness to a possible extradition deal with China has been met at home with criticism and concern over the potential for executions. A quarter of China's 100 most wanted are said to be on Canadian soil. China wants them back and has defended its judicial system.
Extradition requires coordination and consensus from both sides. China has signed extradition treaty with more than 40 countries, including some developed countries in Europe. Both China and Canada are open to talk on this issue.
Paul Evans is an expert on cross-Pacific relations at the University of British Columbia.
What Mr. Trudeau and his government is trying to say is that we need to live together. It's not fundamentally a matter of changing China, but living with China. And that's a new story for Canadians. It's going to take a little bit of time, but building a relationship in a 21st century way, that's where I think Mr. Trudeau wants the future to go.
Both sides say that despite their differences, these more frequent high-level exchanges should set the tone for more frequent low-level ones, and essentially a better tone for better ties. Rowie Ruttenberg, CCTV in Ottawa.
And for more on China-Canada ties, we are joined here in the Beijing studio by Mr. Yang Xiyu, Senior Fellow at the China Institute of International Studies, and also Daniel Cheng, Managing Director for Asia Pacific at Burnett Jones, and former Managing Director of Canada-China Business Council. Meanwhile, joining us from Vancouver in Canada, we have Yves Tiebergen, who is Director of the Institute of Asian Research at the University of British Columbia, and also Senior Fellow at the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada. Gentlemen, welcome to the three of you. This is a big day, of course, for the bilateral relations between China and Canada. Let me ask you first, Mr. Cheng, this question. Some suggest there has been a new approach by the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to China. That is frank private discussion and respectful public discourse with the Chinese leadership. Is that true? Is that how you would characterize his approach?
We don't have information on how Prime Minister Trudeau talks to the Chinese leader in
on
private.
The private, yes.
But what we are observing is that he's managing to have a very frank yet respectful tone when it comes to dialogue with the Chinese leaders. And not many leaders in the world had that ability to do so. And I think this is a continuation, a result of the long history of the bilateral relationship his father set the foundation for, as well as I remember during the election when he was asked which country he would like to learn most from, his answer was China. That set the tone of a very firm and a warm foundation of relationship. He's managed to build his subject and the issues on that good foundation.
Well, Mr. Chang, as you can see, a very positive assessment of the Prime Minister Trudeau Jr., of course, we're talking about. And let me go to you, Mr. Tibergen. What do you think, compared particularly to Prime Minister Harper's approach toward China, the Prime Minister right before Prime Minister Trudeau?
Yeah, so the approach is really different. I agree with what was just said. So fundamentally, Prime Minister Trudeau indeed carries on from where his father left, which is a vision that whatever differences the Canadians may have with China on different issues, China is a central global player and one with whom we have to work and build bridges. So he comes also with appreciation for Chinese culture, Chinese history. He has traveled before to China. And while acknowledging, whatever public opinion feels and trying to fight for Canadian interest, he really comes from a different position from where Stephen Harper was.
However, Mr. Yang, you might understand this better because you've been working in North America for years for the Chinese embassies there, that there sometimes is a simplified understanding of relations with China, let's just say, from some of the Western countries, whether it's human rights or whether it's trade. What do you make of this, what some believe as simplified version of understanding of relations? And where does Canada come from, do you think, now?
Well, I really agree with the wording you use, simplify. In general, compared with the Chinese understanding about Canada and the Canadian understanding about China, there's a huge imbalance. Say, Chinese understand more about Canada than Canadian understand China. So that is one of the fundamental reasons, say, the regular or ordinary Canadian people understand China with a very simple way, either red or black, or human rights or trade. So they always look at China, which is a very diversified country, maybe one of the most diversified country, with a simple way. So such a way of thinking often triggers some differences on small issue, but in general, on fundamental big issues, the two countries as a whole don't hold sharp differences on important issues.
Okay, Mr. Chung, of course you have a very well-informed Prime Minister now, about China at least. He himself traveled to China before he became Prime Minister, even as a young man backpacking during the rush hours of China's Spring Festival. He was talking about that to me during an earlier exclusive interview. But will one Prime Minister make all the difference in terms of Canada's approach to China and Canada's overall policies toward China? I think that is an important question.
The answer is yes and no. Right. He is.
You can't sit on the fences, Mr.
Well,
Chung.
okay, the answer is no. And it takes more than just one Prime Minister to make things work for two countries. The good news is this started early. It started in early 1970 before US and other countries. So that has bought both countries over 3 decades of goodwill. And then we are capitalizing on that as a result. I think it's time for both sides to renew that goodwill, and then definitely this is a good start, and then it will take more than one Prime Minister.
Okay. And for now, we already have a lot of Tai Chi questions, and your answers have been perfect. So let's focus on the real issues, as all of you gentlemen have been talking about, trade. Prime Minister Trudeau has placed China as the centerpiece of his overall international trade policy for Canada. What does that mean? Mr. Chung, you worked earlier for Canada-China Business Council. So China-Canada looking at 46 billion US dollars. That's the trade exchanges between the two countries back in the year 2015, last year.
That's right.
Double that number by the year 2025. 10 years. Can it be doubled? Where does it come from?
First of all, it's doable, okay, and we even have slightly different statistics saying that last year's trade volume was 67 billion, but even that can be doubled in 10 years. This is why I'm saying it. Back in 2010, President Hu Jintao set a goal of doubling the then trade volume between two countries in 5 years, and it was achieved and exceeded in 2 years. So we can do it again in 10 years. And also, the baseline is not high enough. At the moment, Canada's export, only 3.9% is going to China. And on top of that, Canada is having a deficit in trade. It's selling less than a third of what it's buying from China, so that we have a lot of room for growth.
Well, I can tell you have been very tough negotiators when you were with the Canada-China Business Council. Let me go to you, Professor Tipurgan. What about that? I mean, the trade itself. Now, Prime Minister Trudeau has managed to get Canada with China the access market to the Chinese market, canola, for example, which is a very important export product of Canada, by the year at least to 2020. That's the Canadian understanding. What else can still be in its overall trade volume that could help us double it?
Right, so there are a lot of sectors. The news on canola is not actually an increase, it's more a stay, a decision to hold the levels and to, and to postpone a new regulation that would have decreased the amount dramatically. But that's very important politically in Canada. So there is, I agree with what was just said, there's a huge potential that's been untapped. And it covers the whole spectrum, right? It goes from resources, agri-food, etc., to manufacturing, to export by SMEs, small and medium enterprises, and for that, the agreement with Alibaba will play a big role. To newer, high-tech or sort of high intelligence exports in the field of green tech or biotech or life sciences or IT. And for those, it probably will come with a cycle of investment, mutual investment that will allow that trade to grow. And we shouldn't forget financial services. Canada has a lot of know-how there. There's a lot of potential in China. And in tourism, of course. Tourism, if we count tourism as part of it, there's another huge untapped market here, both ways actually.
Right. We have certainly being informed that the two sides have been having some extraordinary free trade talks. For example, some of the numbers you can see we are playing for you on the screen right now. But having said that, though, I mean, gentlemen, what about the overall trade mechanism that the two sides can work on? Earlier, there was TPP, the U.S. proposed, and Canada is a supporter of that. And recently, during his trip to China, the Canadian Prime Minister committed Canada to a member of the AIIB, another interesting infrastructure mechanism that China and others initiated. U.S. is not part of it. Mr. Cheng, will that provide new alternative? How big will those alternatives be?
I think it's very significant. Now Canada is the only North American country that is a member of AIIB. Not only does that open doors for Canada, but also it sends a strong signal to China. As well, it has a potential of expanding AIIB's scope to beyond just the One Belt, One Road, make it a truly global initiative. So, and in terms of other mechanisms, there is a talk about starting they call it exploratory talk about FTA. And Canada has always been a trading nation, and it has many FTA partners in different parts of the world. And of course, China is not U.S. It takes a lot of work.
Right.
And I think this is a wonderful platform that is worth exploring.
Mr. Yang, what do you think?
Well, Mr. Cheng just now mentioned it was doable, about double of the trade volume. I think it's not easy, at least. I think it's quite difficult to double within 10 years, simply because the room for further growing of the trade is very difficult. Actually, the current amount of the trade, bilateral trade, for both sides have made the greatest efforts to reach the current level.
Right.
For the potential, yes, the potential is really, really great. Both China and the Canadian economy are within the 10 largest economy in the world. So the market is quite huge. But the regime, the structure of the economy is quite different. FTA could be helpful. However, there have been more than 3,000 FTAs all over the world. So if you look at the enterprises level, Mr. Reng may be more familiar with about that. Not many enterprises who are doing foreign trade are using for FTAs. So the two governments can set up the goal. I think the key for the success lies in the entrepreneurs' hands. Unfortunately, we haven't set up a smooth channels through free trade and bilateral investment arrangements.
Mr. Cheng, if you can, very briefly respond.
Canada looks at China more than just a second market. It looks at China as a new type of market. There are new type of products and collaborations, particularly in the agriculture and the high-tech area, that had not been explored. And there's a new trend in Canada who people are making things for China. So these are the areas we have high hope for.
Right. Well, before we go, I do want to invite all of yours opinion about one important issue. Is this warmth between the two countries going to be temporary because the bilateral visits at a very high level has been going on over the past few weeks and eventually going to cool down? Or there has been a strategic, fundamental need toward one another that is likely to drive this relationship much further away? Let me start with Professor Tiberghien.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think this is a real reset in the relationship. There was, as we well know, Canada was ahead of other Western countries in starting, very warm and strategic relationship with China in the 1970s. There was a cooling down in the last 10 years. Today, these two visits really mark a reset, a restart. Very important milestones were reached. There were over 20 agreements in China. There is several key agreements this time in Canada. And so as long as we have the Liberal Party in power, which we don't know yet, but at least the current 4 years, you will see a complete change of dynamic. And something important is also the latest opinion polls show that Canadians have warmed up to an engagement with China. There was an increase in 10% of the feelings toward a buttressed relationship with China. And there's a latent, if we take the latent support by people who want more information but support in principle, then we reach as much as 70%.
I see. What about you, Mr. Yang? Strategically important, long-term?
Yes, absolutely. Simply because the two sides have set up a mechanism of Prime Minister's consultation that cover wide range of issues from economic, political, and strategic. And this time, this is the first round of consultation between two prime ministers that is very successful, and will have a long-term influences.
I see. As long as the top leadership are meeting, there's likely to be some very positive outcome. Mr. Cheng, final words.
I am very confident, and I think the two countries have normalized relationship long enough that has survived several full circles, and I think the real hope relies on people's connection, and that 1.3 million people visiting each other every year is going to make a big difference.
Huge difference eventually. That is really the tie between the two. Thank you so much for the three of you on this very big day between China and Canada. Daniel Cheng, Yves Tiberghien, and Yang Xiyu. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with us. Have a great weekend. So the three of you. And you're watching World Inside. Earlier, I had the opportunity to sit down with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau at this year's G20 summit in Hangzhou. He talked about Canada's application to the China-led Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank and his own understanding of China-Canada ties. Let's listen in. What is going on with the AIIB? In fact, your country, Canada, has applied for AIIB. How does that work, and why it becomes the first North American country?
Well, Canada has already a strong presence in building infrastructure in China, whether it's housing or nuclear plants or trains. Canada is building high-quality infrastructure in China, across Asia, around the world. So we come with a significant amount of expertise. But being able to join in this excellent initiative of the AIIB that China is leading on, that is going to create opportunities not just for citizens in China, but for citizens across Asia to get access to good infrastructure. I mean, we know investments in infrastructure create good jobs in the short term, but lead to productivity gains and growth in the long term. And that's something that's really important.
Mr. Prime Minister, this is already your fourth time. And this is the first time as Prime Minister. But tell me about the last 3 times when we were in China, because those were very interesting experiences.
Yeah, my first visit, I was just a little older than my daughter is now, who I'm traveling with on this trip. I was with my father when he was Prime Minister, and we were received in Beijing to huge banquets, and it was a wonderful opportunity. Then I came back a few years later with him when he had finished politics, and I was just, we were traveling as tourists, but my father, of course, was regarded as a respected elder and given wonderful welcome and support everywhere we went. And then when I was in my mid-20s, I came back backpacking, just on my own with a couple of friends.
Where did you go?
Well, we came into Beijing by traveling from train from Moscow, and then we worked our way down. We went to Hangzhou, we went to Taishan, we went to all sorts of beautiful places. When we got to Shanghai, we were challenged because we were traveling during around New Year's, and everyone was traveling to see their families, so all the trains were booked, all the planes were booked. We ended up having to take a slow boat from Shanghai to Guangzhou in Hong Kong. It was a wonderful trip.
And you're, of course, going on with the Canadian tradition of having very good relations with China. But tell me about this relation. Even though the countries are good trade partners with one another, the trade volume is still slow.
Indeed. There's a lot of work to do. I think not just the economic opportunity. I mean, we signed a deal with Alibaba for a brand new Canada Pavilion, which I hope is going to give access to the hundreds of millions of middle class in China, great quality Canadian products, but also understanding that the ties that go beyond economics, people to people, tourism ties, the families that have family members on either side, the cultural ties. There is so much that we can draw on from each other, so much we can challenge ourselves with each other to grow and to improve, that I'm excited about it.
That's Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau talking to us exclusively earlier in Hangzhou. Stay with us on World Insight, still to come. Chinese musician Cui Jian has been rocking audiences at home and abroad for the past 30 years. We ask him about his long march to becoming the Godfather of Chinese rock and roll, and about China's music industry today.
又逼我。
I'm Tian Wei. You're watching World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing. Whether he enjoys it or not, Cui Jian is the godfather of China's rock and roll. In a performance 30 years ago, when few in China knew the words rock and roll, he jumped onto a widely publicized concert stage and shouted out his first well-known work, "Nothing to My Name." Since then, there have been ups and downs well into the beginning of the 21st century for rock and roll artists like him in an ever-changing China. Seeing one of his underground shows was a badge of honor and personality for music enthusiasts in China. Now, finally, he is going to have an opportunity to look back over his 30-year career with a gigantic gig at the Workers' Stadium in Beijing, where he starred 3 decades ago. Take a look at this background first, and then I will ask him what it has been like to be the so-called godfather of China's rock and roll.
我曾经问个不休。 First achieving fame in 1986 because of his signature tune Nothing to My Name, and now called the Godfather of Chinese rock, this is Cui Jiang, rocker and musician. He formed his first band, Chi Ban, in 1984 with 6 other classically trained musicians. His first original album, Rock and Roll on the New Long March, was released in 1989. Cui also created a hybrid type of music by mixing rock and folk. His iconic status is such that international acts ranging from Public Enemy to Paul Simon to the Rolling Stones have all invited him to share the stage with them. And now he's still making waves, and he's still making music. His latest venture is trying to combine rock music with the TV industry, but that has also evoked fresh debates in the rock and roll industry and also about his legacy.
Do you want to be a legend? Do you enjoy being a legend?
No, it's boring. I always say in Chinese, 如果神坛好玩，你去待着去。It makes you blind, it makes you controlled by something, and you care about all the details about success, and then you care about something you don't need it. You know, you lose a lot of chance to make your own judgment. So that kind of stupid things happen. Happen once a year is okay. I can take it. If once a month, I would think it's not worth it.
Many people say with great respect your nickname, Godfather of Chinese rock and roll, and yet you said on some occasions that you want to be the grandson of Chinese rock and roll. What exactly do you mean?
I mean, I can keep the challenge. I can keep the question myself and question everybody equally. I can do something stupid, and nobody really.
Tell me then, what is the stupid thing you want to do?
You know, I question myself, what is the real fun in your life? You know, sometimes you're telling dirty jokes, sometimes you're making, like 调皮的孩子,
like a naughty boy.
Yeah, you know, this kind of feeling, I want to keep that forever. You know, I have a model, you know, like Keith Richards. Yeah, and I heard he's almost 80 years old, he's still, you know, climbing trees. And he got owned, you know, a few years ago. He fell down from a tree. I thought that's just my future. I like that kind of old style, old age style. You know, I like that kind of feeling.
Having fun.
Yeah.
That means you have to not afraid of failure or failure in others' eyes.
You know, the bigger failure, the bigger, you know, joy.
It could be.
Yeah.
Give me an example.
You know, right now I have a bad example, not a good examples.
I love bad examples. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, for you know, 中国之星, China Star.
That was a
yeah.
reality show / singing contest in a way, and you were one of those judges.
Yes, I took this show for 3 reasons. One is I don't hate the TV audience. That's enough good enough, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
For a rock and roll singer, that's great enough.
But a lot of people, they just hate it. They think they don't really think. They just want, you know, entertainment. And I don't believe that. I said maybe the TV workers are not really trying hard about showing something good, showing something serious. The second one is they pay me.
That's good.
Yeah.
You have to live.
Because they have a lot of sponsorship. But this too is not good enough, actually. I still have a strong feeling I shouldn't take it. But then the third one coming is you have your choice. You have the right to make your own choice.
A choice about what?
About the artist.
The artist that you want to present to the audience through the TV.
Yeah. And then, okay, I take the advantage, and then after I really get in the show, I realized I didn't really know what is the TV
industry.
Yeah.
What is it?
You know, there was a movie called The Truth. I think it's quite a new movie from Hollywood. And then there was the host say, "Oh, right now I have to go to makeup. This is the only bad things in this business, and all others is good." Okay, this is exactly the picture of, you know, I was thinking about the TV business. It's everything is makeup, or blow it up and makeup, and I felt, oh, I used to think there was like a stand, 3 legs or 3 groups. One is politicians, one is businessman, one is artists. So every other 2 get together, they will, you know, win the other one. And now I think I'm in the triangle, you know, game, and I'm trying to keep the balance, playing the 2 games with politicians or with businessman. I feel I totally lost control. It's not worth it, you know. I feel I'm naked for no reason. You know, I'm naked in somewhere which I don't like.
When you were participating in that program, you did manage, with a lot of your efforts, to promote some of the rising stars, shall I say, individuals, musicians, and bands, rock and roll, onto the mainstream Chinese TV stage.
Yeah.
That never happened before. However, I have to say, those musicians and bands in the program did not perform to their best level.
No.
During that show.
Yeah.
Very much different from what they would be at the live concert.
I would say the TV production, even the concert production is not really for rock and roll right now, because all the concert business grew up earlier in Taiwan and Hong Kong, and in that area, I think most successful artists is not for rock and roll music. Yeah, not play rock and roll, and all the industry is built on that kind of style.
Rock music first came to China about 30 years ago. Many bands, such as the Tang Dynasty and Black Panther, established themselves in those early years. However, the growth of Chinese rock and heavy metal hit some bumps in the mainland. Far from being in line with mainstream culture, it slid into the underground music scene. But there's more than meets the eye in today's fast-changing China. Young people kept a creative counterculture legacy going through the decades. Bands like Tong Yang and Brain Failure nowadays attract numerous fans. The ups and downs of rock have been strongly tied to the evolution of contemporary China. However, 3 decades have passed since the arrival of rock in China, and the country has also changed a lot. Whether rock can still be active in China remains being a question mark.
Does China still need rock and roll?
Yeah, I think it's because how many things you think, on the desire, how big desire you have, and how big imagination you want to share with the people. I think it's always together with artists.
Is China's rock and roll still alive?
It's not a question.
It's not a question.
It's not a question.
It's not a question. A lot of people say that it is dead. They say, well, compared to 30 years ago, 20 years ago, Chinese rock and roll dead.
Okay, I give you different numbers. Okay, when they think Chinese rock and roll is alive, it's like 80s or 90s, right? Mid 80s or early 90s, right? But I tell you the numbers. There was none concert there. There has no record company, labels, the news from newspapers, not even from radios. People talk about rock and roll, and then they write some articles about rock and roll. That's it. Then they don't even spend money on the club shows of rock and roll music. There was no club shows. There was no rock and roll music instrument sale. So how can you say this is alive? I would say that's the time for open the window. And the rock and roll wind came in. That's the moment. But it's now rock and roll age.
And now it is?
Now it is.
Why would you say so?
Because how many rock and roll music festival every year you can see, and how many people they spend money every week for music, drinking in the bar for the live band, for live music, and spend a lot of money for staying in the festival. The young people, they're always there, and the music instrument sale, you know, every year they have more than 10% raise. So that, I said that earlier, many times. I said, when the people they spend money for the live music every week, and then they enjoy the groove, and they cannot live without them, and then there is this rock and roll age coming.
But how many musicians do you think are as disciplined as you are today?
You know, that's why I like jazz music. And all the jazz musicians it's a technique. It's 上不封顶的一种技术的追求。
The techniques could be
Scale.
sky high in a way.
Yeah, all the keys and all the rhythm and all the styles. You can spend endless time on this, and then you still don't get it. That's jazz music.
The rock musicians these days in China, can they still have strength? Can they still have the techniques as you said?
That's why I found out I have three in me. I have 3 CJ in me. One is a very serious, boring guy. And one is a very oily, you know, very easy to deal with. And the other one was really trying things to entertaining themselves, myself. You know, I have to, you know, to learn the new way to get free, you know, to feel free. What I want to talk about is the energy of the rock and roll music, or the energy of a person, the energy of a movement, the energy of a program. So all have an energy. So what is the engine? I would say, okay, Chinese rock music, the engine of Chinese rock music is the freedom of express, or of thinking, of imagine, and then put that. And we don't know how to do other things. No, the only thing we can do is playing music. So I want to put all these kind of things in my works.
Mr. Cui, you were never afraid of trying new things. You created some different genres of music, which many of your old-time fans are not used to. You also made movies, 3 of them, and now you're working on some documentaries. What would all of these experiments mean to you?
It's like an energy, it's like an engine, make me feel, no sleep, don't eat, just get it done. That's
You
the
love
energy.
it, don't you?
Yeah, it's a passion, you know. So that is kind of I think it's one of the most beautiful, you know, moment in everybody's, you know, life. I believe you have it. I believe everybody know what I'm talking about. You know, that turn you, you know.
It turns you on.
Yeah.
And that energy just flows out.
Yeah.
Now, when you reflect back 30 years, what do you make of this?
I feel I did a lot of things, but I didn't. I only had 6 albums come out during, you know, this 30 years. But I made 3 movies, 1 short, 1 30 minutes, 1 100 minutes. That's it. I didn't really, you know, I'm a pretty hard worker, but I don't know why my works is small numbers. I really don't know why. Maybe because I'm really picky about quality, about everything I did. And I didn't know the time flies that fast. I think I'm a quite good friend with time. So I never feel time is pushing me. Time always, you know, pretty nice to me. Okay, take your time. Okay, I do.
When you came in, I present you with a little cupcake because it's your birthday. There was a number, 25 years.
Double fives.
After talking to you, I feel you're exactly that age.
Okay.
25 years
Thank
old.
you.
Congratulations,
Thank you.
Cui Jian.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Well, that's my interview with Cui Jian, a rock legend from China. 30 years since his first nationwide public performance, he apparently remains a man of enormous energy, vitality, and curiosity, still stubbornly desiring to be in control, however circumstances have changed. He is going to make a retrospective gig on September the 30th in Beijing, back on the stage where he first made his name decades ago. That, in itself, is already exhilarating if one understands the dramatic changes that took place in China over the past 3 decades. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more of our program, visit our website. Just type in World Insight CCTV News into your search engine. You'll be able to find us, or you can also check out our YouTube channel. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching. And tune in again next week for more insights from across China and around the world. Good night and have a great weekend.